Hello and welcome to Sex in the News. We are the Siegel Brothers. And tonight we're going to be talking about a fond farewell to a legend in our field. We're going to be talking about the Texas Board of Education and some of their latest decisions about their sex ed curriculum. And we will talk about some surprisingly happy news coming from Pope Francis.
Our first story tonight is about the passing of Sharee Height, a true legend in the field, perhaps not as household a name as Masters and Johnson or Alfred Kinsey, but Sharee Height was a revolutionary.
Absolutely.
And way ahead of her time.
Mm-hmm.
She's most known for her first book in 1976, known as simply The Height Report, a nationwide study of female sexuality. She had two other books. She wrote a book on men, the Height Report on Men and Male Sexuality in 1981, and rounding out the trilogy, Women in Love, A Cultural Revolution in Progress in 1987. So, we were in college in those days, undergraduate school, but she was, again, like so many before and since, saying the truth, to a society that was not yet ready to hear it. And what happens? What do we do to those people?
Absolutely.
We vilify them.
That's right.
She
That's
got
right.
treated so badly, she ended up moving to Europe.
That's right. That's right.
And it's sad that hopefully, posthumously, she will get the propers that she so well deserves.
Hopefully. And there's one line that I do want to share that I really appreciate, and I think this really kind of just encapsulates what she did. Right? Now, I will qualify this by saying that, and I say this to a lot of my students when we talk about some of these things in psychology and things in the field, that remember at the time, nobody had ever said this before.
Right.
We take for granted that we already know how to have accepted this stuff and kind of live with it on a day-to-day basis. But this is part of what made her revolutionary.
And it was the 70s, which was supposed to be revolutionary.
Right, exactly.
But there was no talking about how you get from breaking the rules to comfortably living new rules.
Exactly. Now, here's, again, a very simple quote, but I think it really sums up her work. Researchers should stop telling women what they should feel sexually and start asking them what they do feel sexually. Now,
and now we add what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
Sexually.
Exactly. That was a landmine in the 70s at the time.
Rest in peace, Sharee
Yes,
Height.
indeed. And thank you for all the work you've done and what you've contributed to this field.
And as we often complain, sexuality education is political. Sadly, unfortunately, it should not be. It's sexual health. But no great shock to people paying attention, but the Texas Board of Ed has rejected proposed LGBTQ lessons as part of what students should learn in school.
That's right.
So are they not just given a green light to continued homophobia and bullying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, one of the board members had said in an interview with the press, I believe this was it was ABC News, was even talking about how his daughter had come out as being gay this past summer, and now he has to deal with all of the fact that she has to been holding in all this time, and now she's thinking, wait a minute, my board, the board that I sit on, is now taking the side of bullies. They've chosen not to align themselves with students and health and safety, but instead they've aligned themselves with the bullies.
Betsy DeVos hasn't weighed in on this. No.
Unbelievable.
There is a glimmer of hope in this, right? Because part of the proposed changes to the curriculum included gender and orientation diversity and respect.
Right.
It also included teaching middle schoolers about consent.
Right.
Now, who could possibly object to that?
Oh, I know. People in Texas and a lot of other places.
It's the perennial slippery slope argument, or putting ideas in their heads. They're all the same crap for hundreds of years.
It's just stupidity.
Some parents argue, according to the report, that teaching about consent might promote sexual behavior among children. Like,
It's that same old trope about if you teach young people about sexual health, they will go out and have sex.
Right.
My favorite stupidity is if you teach them, it gives them permission. Right? And I want to find that one kid who wants their parents' permission
you're right.
to have sex.
Yeah.
Right.
Gloria Feldt, past president of Planned Parenthood, once said, you could take a baby and lock them in the closet and hide them from all the evils of the world. They'll never know about violence or drugs or crime or vandalism, gangs, anything, but they'll still discover their sexuality.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, on a related note, right, just to show that we're not, completely biased, we do need to acknowledge that this same Board of Education actually did
Preliminary approval.
right? Given preliminary approval, which means it still has to be
Maybe.
voted on and codified. But it looks like they are positioning themselves to go beyond that abstinence-only model that they've been teaching all along and start teaching about contraception, birth control,
STD prevention.
STI prevention, STD prevention, all of that kind of stuff. First time since 1997 that they made any kind of change to their curriculum.
So yes, what I'm most hopeful about, the glimmer of hope, is that people are realizing that teaching abstinence only contributes. And Texas has one of the highest teen birth rates in the country.
Right.
And, at least 4 out of 10 kids report being sexually active, but they tell them to just say no. And we know how effective that's been.
Right. Do you think there's a connection between those two things? Between them agreeing to teach birth control and contraception and their rejection of anything for LGBT students? You think it might be that they're hoping that if more people use birth control, there'd be fewer gay people and trans people in the world?
Bill Maher had a classic line way back when there was that talk about the gay gene. He said, they finally found the one thing to change Pat Robertson's views on abortion.
That's right.
Like, if they could tell a fetus has a gay gene, I guess we'll be all right with
maybe abortion's not so bad.
Yeah, with that one.
So just wondering. That's all. Just wondering.
Yeah.
And our third story is more of a feel-good piece.
I've liked this Pope since the beginning.
Yep. And it says a lot for a Jewish atheist to like a pope. But basically, let me just sort of give you the headline here, that Pope Francis says that having sex and eating good food is, quote, simply divine. Right? He goes on to say that pleasure arrives directly from God. It's neither Catholic nor Christian nor anything else. Pleasure is simply divine. Now, this was in an interview he was given, and he was focusing more on what he's been referring to as the slow food movement, which is in response to the fast food proliferation that's been all around the world. The Pope Francis went on to critique the, quote, overzealous morality of a Roman Catholic Church that denounced pleasure in the past, calling it a wrong interpretation of the Christian message.
Ooh, yeah.
And I quote, "The Church has condemned inhuman, brutish, vulgar pleasure, but has, on the other hand, always accepted human, simple, moral pleasure. The pleasure of eating is there to keep you healthy by eating, just like sexual pleasure is there to make love more beautiful and guarantee the perpetuation of the species. The pleasure of eating and sexual pleasure comes from God."
Yeah, of course he had to stick in that
okay,
part.
it is religious.
Yeah.
Right? So I can give him that.
I was so excited he had to get the baby thing, and it's his job.
It's his job.
But,
I'm okay with that.
Remember,
but to say that pleasure
right.
is something we should be experiencing, and again, from a religious perspective, a gift from God, not something to be afraid of and run away from.
Or called dirty.
That's right.
Or disgusting.
That's right. All
yes.
right.
So,
and our final moment, right? We're going to kind of maybe look at a piece that we would like to call Poetic Justice.
It warrants that title.
Yeah, it sure does.
Interesting one last week about a leader of a giant Orthodox church. This week's piece comes to us from Central Texas. Imagine two Texas stories in the same night. The chief of police in Hamilton was arrested on child sex charges.
but not just child sex charges. Right?
What was the charge?
The actual charge is continuous sexual abuse of a child.
That's a first for me.
And he is a Texas police chief who did run as the Republican candidate for the county's sheriff and lost that.
Yeah.
So, again,
Hypocrisy knows no bounds.
knows no bounds. But this Texas police chief arrested on child sex abuse charges. A little poetic justice.
Thanks for joining us for Sex in the News. See you next week.